The forest moon had no name. It was just a number in the star charts, a small green world circling a gas giant that no one cared about. But today, smoke rose from its surface. Today, something had crashed there. Ambassador stood at the front of the rescue shuttle as it descended through the clouds. She was tall, even for a. Her silver fur caught the dim light from the viewport, and her 4 arms were folded across her chest. She had seen many things in her 300 years of life. Crashed ships were common enough. But this one was different. This one was human. They had watched humans for decades. They sent tiny probes to observe Earth and its colonies. They recorded human broadcasts and studied human behavior, but they never made contact. The Galactic Council had decided long ago that humans were too primitive, too violent, too short-lived to be worth the trouble. Let them play with their simple ships and their little colonies. In a few thousand years, maybe they would be ready. Had accepted this wisdom without question, until now. The shuttle landed in a clearing made by the crash itself. Trees lay flat in all directions, pointing away from the center like the spokes of a wheel. At the center sat the wreckage of the human transport ship. It had broken into 3 main pieces. Fire still burned in some sections. The smell of smoke and melted metal filled the air. Ambassador, said her second-in-command. He was shorter than, with darker fur and a permanent frown. We should not be here. If the Council learns we made direct contact with human remains. The Council sent us to investigate the crash, said. That is what we are doing. The Council meant for us to observe from orbit, to send probes, not to walk among the dead. Turned to look at him. Her golden eyes were calm but firm. If there are survivors, we will help them. That is what civilized beings do. Said nothing more, but his disapproval was clear. The team moved through the wreckage carefully. There were bodies, counted 12 in the first section alone. Humans were so fragile, their skin tore so easily, their bones broke like dry sticks. How did they survive at all? The medical officer scanned each body with her equipment. She was old for nearly 400 years, and she had seen death in many forms, but she moved among the human dead with something like respect. They were colonists, said quietly, families, there are children among them. Felt something heavy settle in her chest. Children, even primitive species loved their children. They moved into the second section of the ship. More bodies, more silence. The emergency lights flickered red, casting strange shadows on the walls. Somewhere a broken pipe hissed. It was who found the cargo bay. The door was jammed, bent by the impact. Used 2 of her arms to pull while pushed from the other side. The metal screamed as it moved, and then the door fell away. The cargo bay was a mess of broken containers and scattered supplies. But in the far corner, protected by a wall of secured storage units, something moved. Froze. Ambassador reached for his weapon. Wait, held up one hand. She moved forward slowly, stepping over debris. The movement came again, small, weak, and then she heard it. A cry high and thin, the cry of an infant. Moved faster now. She pushed aside a fallen container and stopped. There in a nest of emergency blankets lay a human baby. It was tiny, impossibly small, with pink skin and a tuft of black hair. Its eyes were squeezed shut and its small hands reached upward at nothing. It was crying, but the sound was weak, tired. But that was not what made its breath catch in her throat. The baby was wrapped in bandages, white, clean bandages that covered its small body from chest to hip. A thin tube ran from its tiny arm to a bag of clear fluid hanging from a broken shelf above. The bag was nearly empty, but it was still dripping. Someone had set up an IV line. Someone had performed medical care. Called, her voice strange in her own ears. Come here now. The medical officer arrived and stopped beside. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she knelt down, her 4 hands moving with practiced care. She scanned the infant with her equipment, her eyes growing wider with each passing second. "This is impossible," whispered. "What is it?" "The bandaging, it is perfect, completely sterile. The wrapping follows patterns that prevent infection and promote healing. And the IV insertion," shook her head. "This was done by someone with advanced medical training, but humans do not have." "Clearly they do," said. Continued her scan, then she stopped. Her face went pale beneath her fur. "Ambassador, the infant has a surgical incision." "What?" Here, pointed to the baby's abdomen hidden beneath the bandages. "Someone cut this child open. They went inside, did something, and then closed the wound. The stitching is precise, professional. This was surgery, Ambassador, real surgery." Stared at the tiny human. It had stopped crying now. Its eyes were open, dark and unfocused, looking up at her with something that might have been curiosity. "Who did this?" asked, "and when?" Checked the wound again. "Based on the healing, this was done very recently, hours ago, perhaps less." "That means it was done after the crash." "No," his voice was barely a whisper. "Based on the timeline, this was done during the crash, while the ship was breaking apart." Silence filled the cargo bay. Even, who had been standing at the door with his hand still on his weapon, seemed stunned. "That is impossible," he said finally. "No one could perform surgery during a crash. The ship was falling apart. There would have been no gravity, no stability, no." And yet, looked down at the baby. It was watching her now, its tiny fingers wrapping around one of her larger fingers. The grip was weak but determined. And yet here this child is, alive, with a surgical wound that is healing properly. She made her decision. "We are taking the child." Ambassador stepped forward. "We cannot, the council." "The council can discuss it with me when we return." Carefully lifted the baby, supporting its head the way she had seen humans do in the recordings. The child was so light, so warm. It made a small sound and pressed its face against her fur. Something inside shifted, something old and deep that she had not felt in a very long time. "Maintain the IV, keep the child stable, search the rest of the wreckage. I want to know who did this. I want to know how." As they carried the infant back to the shuttle, looked over her shoulder at the ruined ship. Somewhere in that wreckage was a story of someone who had done the impossible, someone who had looked at death and refused to accept it. She did not know yet that the story would change everything. She did not know that this tiny human child would become a bridge between worlds. She only knew that someone had fought very hard to keep this baby alive, and intended to find out who. The shuttle rose through the smoke and clouds, carrying its strange cargo toward the stars. Behind them the wreckage continued to burn, but the child was safe. Against all odds, against all reason, the child was safe. And somewhere in the universe, the spirit of the one who saved her was finally at rest. The research station hung in orbit above the forest moon like a silver flower. Inside, the recovered black box sat on a table in the main conference room. It was small and burned on one side, but its data core was intact. Had worked through the night to extract the recordings. Had not slept. She had spent the hours watching the human infant in the medical bay. The child was stable now, properly connected to equipment that was far more advanced than the simple IV bag that had kept her alive. The surgery wound was healing well. Said the child would recover fully. But the question remained, who had saved her, and how? Now, as the station's artificial dawn began to light the conference room, sat with, and 3 other senior officers. The black box was ready to share its secrets. "The recording begins 42 minutes before impact," said. She touched a control, and the air above the table filled with light. The image showed the interior of the human ship. It was a simple vessel, designed for colony transport. The camera was mounted in the ceiling of the medical bay, looking down at a small room filled with basic equipment. A young human woman stood at a counter, organizing supplies. She was small by standards. Her black hair was pulled back from her face, and she wore a white coat marked with symbols that now knew meant doctor in human language. Her name, according to the ship's manifest, was Dr. Park. She was 29 years old. She was the ship's only medical officer. She was humming a song as she worked, a simple melody, something from Earth perhaps. She looked peaceful, happy even. Then the ship shook. The image flickered. Doctor stumbled, catching herself on the counter. Alarms began to sound. Red lights flashed. A voice came over the ship's speakers, speaking in the human language. Warning, hull breach. All passengers to emergency stations. Doctor moved quickly. She grabbed an emergency kit and ran for the door. The camera angle changed as the recording jumped to a different part of the ship. Watched the young doctor run through corridors that were already filling with smoke. She watched her help a family seal their emergency pod. She watched her direct passengers to safety with calm, clear commands. Then the ship shook again, harder this time. The artificial gravity failed and everyone began to float. Doctor grabbed a handrail and pulled herself forward. She was heading for the colony section, where the families with children were kept. The next camera showed the colony section. It was chaos. Pods had broken loose. People floated in the air, screaming. And in the center of it all, thrown from its pod by the impact, was a baby. The infant was crying, its small body tumbling slowly through the zero gravity. Blood floated around it in tiny red spheres. Even without medical training, could see that the child was badly hurt. Doctor saw it too. She launched herself across the room. She caught the baby with both hands, pulling it against her chest. Then she looked around, searching for the child's parents. The recording showed her face clearly. Could see the moment when she understood. The parents were dead. Their pod had been crushed by falling debris. There was no one else. Doctor looked at the baby in her arms. She looked at the destruction around her. The ship was dying. Everyone knew it. In the background, could hear the captain's voice announcing that impact was unavoidable. 40 minutes until they hit the moon's surface. Then Doctor did something that made his heart stop. She went back to the medical bay. The recording followed her. She moved through the floating debris with the baby held close. When she reached the medical bay, she sealed the door behind her. She strapped herself to the operating table using emergency restraints. Then she laid the baby on the table beside her and began to examine it. Her voice was calm as she spoke to the empty room. The recording captured everything. Infant female, approximately 8 months old, severe abdominal trauma, probable internal bleeding from blunt force impact. She touched the baby's stomach gently and the child screamed. Yes, definite internal bleeding. Without surgery, she will die within the hour. She looked up at the ceiling. The ship shook around her. Sparks flew from a broken panel. Time to impact, 38 minutes. That is enough. Watched, unable to breathe, as Doctor began to prepare for surgery. She moved with incredible speed. She pulled supplies from cabinets that were coming loose from the walls. She set up a sterile field using emergency sheets and clips. She prepared anesthesia, calculating the dose for an infant's tiny body, all while the ship fell apart around her. The gravity came back suddenly, slamming everything to the floor. Doctor grunted in pain but did not stop. Blood ran from a cut on her forehead. She wiped it away with her sleeve and kept working. "It is acceptable," she said to the crying baby. "I am here, I will help you. Just stay with me a little longer." She administered the sedation. The baby's cries faded to silence. Then, with steady hands, Doctor picked up a surgical blade. The next 20 minutes were the longest of his life. She watched this young human woman perform surgery in conditions that would have made any doctor refuse to try. The gravity failed and returned 3 times. Fires broke out twice, and Doctor put them out with one hand while holding the surgical tools with the other. Debris struck the medical bay walls. The lights flickered and died, and she continued working by the glow of emergency strips. Through it all, her hands never shook. Her voice remained calm. She talked to the unconscious baby as if they were having a pleasant conversation. "There you are, I found the tear, it is not so bad, we can fix this. Hold still for me, little one, almost done." She found the ruptured blood vessel. She repaired it with tiny stitches. She closed the wound layer by layer, her movements precise despite the chaos. Then she wrapped the baby in sterile bandages, set up an IV line, and secured the child in the safest corner of the cargo bay. The recording showed her checking the IV 3 times, adjusting the bandages, tucking the emergency blankets more tightly around the small body. "There," she said softly, "you will be safe now." She looked at the ceiling, 8 minutes until impact. Then Doctor did one more thing. She sat down in front of the cargo bay camera and began to speak. Her face was pale. Her hands, which had been so steady during the surgery, were shaking now, but her voice was clear. "To whoever finds this child, my name is Dr. Park. I have performed emergency surgery to repair a ruptured blood vessel in her abdomen. The wound should heal if she receives proper care. Change the bandages every 12 hours. Keep the IV running until she can drink normally. Watch for fever or infection." She paused. Her eyes were bright with tears she would not let fall. "Her name is," it was on her family's manifest. "Her parents are dead, she has no one else. Please, please take care of her. She fought so hard to live, she deserves a chance." The ship shook violently. Doctor looked toward the sound of tearing metal. "I wish I could do more, I wish I could stay with her, but I am glad. I am glad I could do this much. Please tell her someday. Tell her she was loved, even by a stranger." The recording ended. The conference room was silent. Realized that tears were running down her fur. She was not alone, was weeping openly. Evan's eyes were wet. "She knew she would die," said finally. Her voice was barely a whisper. She knew, and she chose to spend her final moments saving a child she had never met. No one answered. There was nothing to say. Stood slowly. She looked at the frozen image of Dr. Park, her face young and tired and impossibly brave. "Send this recording to the Galactic Council. Send it to every member world. Let them see what humans are capable of." She walked to the door and stopped. "And her name is, we will call her." Doctor wanted her to keep her name. As left the room, she carried the weight of what she had seen. A young woman, alone and dying, who had chosen to fight death with her bare hands, not for herself, for a stranger's child. In that moment, knew that everything they believed about humans was wrong. Everything. The recording of Dr. Park spread through the galaxy like fire. Within days, every member of the Galactic Council had seen it. Within weeks, it had reached every inhabited world, and everywhere it went, it raised the same question. What kind of species produces people like this? The Council decided to find out. They sent a formal delegation to make first contact with humanity, and they sent investigators to learn everything they could about human medical practices. Was one of those investigators. He was young for a barely 200 years old. He had studied alien cultures his entire life, but he had never studied humans. They had seemed too simple, too primitive. What could they possibly teach the great civilizations of the galaxy? Now, standing in a human hospital on Earth, was beginning to understand how wrong he had been. The hospital was called Seoul National University Medical Center. It was one of the best on the planet, the humans told him. Found it small and cluttered compared to medical facilities. The equipment looked basic. The rooms were cramped. The staff moved constantly, rushing from one patient to another with barely a moment to rest. And yet, his guide was a human woman named Han. She was a paramedic, she explained, which meant she was one of the first to respond when emergencies happened. She had been doing this job for 15 years. "What made you choose this work?" asked her. Smiled, it was a tired smile but warm. "My mother was sick when I was young. The paramedics who came to help her were so calm, so kind. I wanted to be like them. And do you find the work difficult? Every day, she did not hesitate, but someone has to do it. She took him to meet other medical workers. Each one had stories that left stunned. The first was a surgeon named Doctor. He was older then, with gray in his hair and scars on his hands. He told about a day 20 years ago when a tsunami hit his coastal town. The hospital was destroyed in the first wave, Doctor said. I was trapped in the rubble with 4 patients. The water was rising. We had maybe an hour before we drowned. What did you do? One of the patients had a crushed leg. It was dying and the infection would kill him soon. I had no tools, no anesthesia, just a pocket knife and a bottle of whiskey that had somehow survived the wave. Felt his stomach turn. You did not. I did, Doctor's voice was matter of fact. I gave him the whiskey for the pain. Then I cut off his leg above the knee, tied off the blood vessels with strips from my shirt, kept him talking until the rescue teams found us. He survived. He survived. He walked me to my wedding 5 years later, on a prosthetic leg, but he walked. Wrote everything down, his hands trembling slightly. He asked the question that burned in his mind. How did you stay calm? How did you know what to do? Doctor thought about it. I did not stay calm. I was terrified, but the fear did not matter. The patient mattered. When someone needs help, you help them. You figure out the rest later. The second story came from herself. 3 years ago, she said, I was responding to a helicopter crash in the mountains, medical transport. The pilot had a heart attack mid-flight which caused the crash. When I reached the wreck, the pilot was dying. His heart had stopped. There was also a passenger, a pregnant woman, who was going into early labor from the stress. She paused, remembering. I had 2 hands, 2 patients, one dying, one giving birth, no backup for at least 30 minutes. What did you do? I did both. She said it simply, as if it was obvious. I started CPR on the pilot with one hand, positioned the woman with my other hand and my knees, talked her through the breathing exercises. When the baby came, I caught him with one hand while still pumping the pilot's chest with the other. Stared at her. That is not possible. It was not pretty, admitted. But they both lived. The pilot, the mother, the baby, all 3, that is what matters. The third story was perhaps the strangest of all. Minyu Lee was not a human doctor. He was a veterinarian, which meant he cared for animals rather than people. But he had a story that made question everything he thought he knew. It was an emergency surgery, Minyu explained. A child 8 years old needed her heart repaired, rare condition. The surgery was scheduled for months, but when they opened her up, the surgeon had a stroke, right there in the operating room, collapsed on the floor. What happened? I was in the hospital visiting a friend. Someone ran into the hallway screaming for a doctor, any doctor. I was the only one close enough. Minyu's hands twisted together as he spoke. I am not a surgeon. I work on dogs and cats, but I had read about human heart surgery. I studied it for interest, never thinking I would use it. You operated on the child. I had no choice. She was open on the table. The surgeon was unconscious. If I did nothing, she would die in minutes. He closed his eyes. So I did what the book said, step by step. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the tools, but I did it. I repaired her heart. She was in the recovery room by the time the backup surgeon arrived. And she lived. She is 16 now. She wants to be a veterinarian like me. Minyu smiled, but there were tears in his eyes. She sends me a card every year on the anniversary. Filled notebook after notebook. He interviewed dozens of humans, hundreds. Every one of them had stories. Stories of impossible rescues. Stories of refusing to give up. Stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things because someone needed help. He asked them all the same question, why? The answers were always the same. Because someone had to. Because I could not just watch them die. Because that is what people do. We help each other. Began to understand something important. Humans did not see themselves as heroes. They did not think they were doing anything special. To them, helping others in need was simply normal, expected, what any decent person would do. They lived for hundreds of years. They had time to be careful, time to plan, time to accept that some things could not be changed. Humans did not have that luxury. Their lives were short, barely a century if they were lucky. They did not have time to accept death. They did not have time to give up. Every moment mattered. Every life mattered. And so they fought. They fought death with everything they had, with their hands and their tools and their stubborn refusal to surrender. They ran toward danger instead of away from it. They sacrificed themselves for strangers. They performed miracles in the mud and the blood and the chaos because someone needed them to. On his last day on Earth stood on a hill overlooking the city of Seoul. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Millions of humans lived below him, going about their short, bright lives. He thought about Dr. Park, alone on a dying ship, saving a child she had never met. He thought about Doctor, cutting off a man's leg with a pocket knife to save his life. He thought about Han, delivering a baby with one hand while performing CPR with the other. He thought about Minyu Lee, a veterinarian who saved a child's heart because no one else was there. These were not soldiers, not heroes from stories. They were ordinary people, teachers and doctors and animal healers, parents and children and friends. And every one of them was capable of miracles. Turned away from the city and walked back to his shuttle. He had a report to write. The Galactic Council needed to know what he had learned. Humans were not primitive. They were not simple. They were something far more dangerous and wonderful than anyone had imagined. They were relentless. And the galaxy would never be the same. The Grand Council Chamber was the largest room on the It was built from white stone that glowed softly in the light of 3 suns streaming through crystal windows. Hundreds of seats rose in circles around a central platform, filled with representatives from every species in the Galactic Union. This was where the fate of civilizations was decided. Today, they would decide the fate of one small human child. Ambassador stood on the central platform. She was dressed in formal robes of silver and blue, the colors of her office. But she did not feel like an ambassador today. She felt like something else, something she had not been for a very long time. She felt like a mother. Little was not in the chamber. She was in the care of back on the research station, healthy and growing stronger every day. Her surgical wound had healed completely. She was starting to smile, to reach for things, to make the small, happy sounds that all Bobbies make when they are loved. She was also completely alone in the universe. Her parents were dead. Her family ship was destroyed. The investigation had found no relatives, no one to claim her. She was an orphan of the stars and wanted to adopt her. The council had debated for weeks. The recording of Dr. Park had changed many minds. Reports from Earth had changed more, but there were still those who opposed any connection with humanity. Today, the final decision would be made. Elder rose from his seat in the highest circle. He was the oldest member of the council, nearly 1,000 years old. His fur had turned from silver to pure white, and his 4 arms were thin with age, but his voice was still strong. "Ambassador," he said, "you have asked us to consider something that has never been done before. You wish to adopt an alien child, a human child, a member of a species that the Council has never officially contacted, a species that many consider too primitive, too violent, too unstable to join our union." He leaned forward, his ancient eyes sharp. "Why should we grant this request? One act of bravery does not define a people. One doctor's sacrifice, however noble, does not erase the wars and violence that fill human history. Why should we welcome this species into our fold?" Had prepared for this question. She had written speeches, memorized arguments, gathered evidence. But now, standing in the chamber, she set all of that aside. She spoke from her heart. Elder members of the council, you ask what defines a people. She paused, letting her words settle in the great chamber. I will tell you what I have learned. She touched a control, and the air above her filled with images. Human hospitals, rescue workers pulling survivors from collapsed buildings, doctors working through the night, ordinary people stopping to help strangers on the street. Humans have a word that does not translate well into our language. The word is triage. It means deciding who can be saved when you cannot save everyone. They invented this concept because they refuse to stop trying, even when success seems impossible. The images changed. Firefighters running into burning buildings, lifeguards diving into stormy seas, paramedics working in war zones. They have doctors who will work for 40 hours without rest. They have strangers who will donate their own organs to save people they have never met. They have individuals who run toward danger instead of away from it, because someone might need help. Turned slowly, looking at the faces around her. Some were sympathetic, some were skeptical, all were listening. You say that one act of bravery does not define a people. I say you are wrong. I say that a people is defined precisely by what its individuals choose to do in their worst moments, when there is nothing to gain, when no one is watching, when they could easily do nothing and no one would blame them. She gestured, and the image of Dr. Park appeared above her, young, tired, brave beyond measure. This woman was 29 years old. She had no children of her own. She was alone on a dying ship, and she had minutes to live. She could have spent those minutes any way she wanted. She could have prayed. She could have cried. She could have simply accepted her fate. His voice broke, but she continued. Instead, she spent her final moments in pain and fear, performing surgery on a baby she had never met. Not because it was logical, not because she would be remembered, not because anyone would ever know, but because the child needed help and could provide it. She looked up at Elder. I have lived for 300 years. I have seen many things. I have met many people. And I tell you now in front of this council that I do not know if I could do what Park did. I do not know if any of us could. She paused, letting the silence stretch. But humans can, ordinary humans, not just soldiers or heroes, teachers, doctors, parents, children. They carry this capacity for sacrifice inside them like a fire that never goes out. They will fight death with their bare hands. They will give everything they have for a stranger. They will refuse to surrender even when surrender is the only logical choice. Straighten her shoulders. You ask why we should welcome humanity. I ask you, how can we not? Any species that produces individuals like Park deserves our respect. Any species that can love so fiercely, so selflessly, so completely, deserves our welcome. She looked around the chamber one final time. I am asking to adopt one human child, but I am also asking for something more. I am asking this council to see humanity for what it truly is, not primitive, not violent, not unstable, but brave, compassionate, relentless. She bowed her head. That is all I have to say. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Elder rose again. We will vote, he said simply. The voting took an hour. Representatives from dozens of species cast their decisions in private, each one weighing the evidence, the arguments, the recording they had all seen. Stood on the platform, trying not to tremble. Finally, Elder stepped forward with the results. Ambassador, the council has reached a decision. Held her breath. By a vote of 63 in favor and 41 opposed, your request is granted. You may adopt the human child known as. Furthermore, the council has voted to open formal diplomatic relations with humanity. They will be invited to apply for membership in the Galactic Union. His legs nearly gave out beneath her. She gripped the edge of the platform for support. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Elder looked at her with something that might have been respect. "Do not thank us yet, Ambassador. You have taken on a great responsibility. This child will be the first human raised among us. She will be watched, studied, judged. Everything she does will reflect on her entire species." "I understand." "Do you?" The old's eyes were kind but serious. "She will face prejudice, suspicion, fear. There are many who still believe humans are dangerous. She will have to prove them wrong every day of her life." Lifted her chin. "Then she will prove them wrong. I have faith in her." Elder nodded slowly. "Faith, yes, that is another human concept, is it not? Believing in something without proof." He paused. "Perhaps we have something to learn from them after all." The council session ended. Representatives began to file out of the chamber, talking in small groups. Some congratulated, others avoided her eyes, but it did not matter. The decision was made. Walked out of the chamber and found waiting for her. Her old second-in-command looked uncomfortable, but he spoke anyway. "Congratulations, Ambassador." "Thank you." He shifted his weight. "I was wrong about the humans, about the child. I see that now." Smiled at him. "We were all wrong, but we can be right from now on." She left him standing there and walked toward the shuttle bay. She had a long journey ahead of her. A journey to a research station where a small human baby was waiting for her. A baby named, who had been saved by a stranger's love and would grow up to bridge two worlds. Did not know what the future would hold. She did not know what challenges would face or what she would become. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Dr. Park had not died for nothing. Her sacrifice would echo through the stars. 20 years had passed since the crash on the forest moon. 20 years since a dying doctor had saved a stranger's baby. 20 years since the galaxy had learned what humans were truly capable of. Everything had changed. Dr. Park stood at the viewport of the medical transport ship, watching the planet 4 grow larger below. She was 20 years old now, tall for a human, with black hair cut short for practicality and dark eyes that missed nothing. She wore the uniform of the Galactic Medical Corps, the organization that had been created to bring human and doctors together. She wore two names, as was the custom for adopted children. Park, for the woman who had given her life, for the woman who had given her love. Both names weighed heavy on her shoulders today. 4 was dying. A plague had swept through the colony there 3 weeks ago. It moved fast and killed faster. The local medical teams had been overwhelmed within days. Thousands were dead. Tens of thousands more were sick. The calls for help had gone out across the galaxy. And the humans had answered. 300 human doctors, nurses, and paramedics were on this ship. Volunteers, every one of them. They had left their homes, their families, their safe lives to travel across the stars and help strangers. Because that was what humans did. "Dr. Park," a voice came from behind her, turned to see Doctor, the mission commander. He was an older man, gray-haired and calm, with the steady hands of a surgeon who had seen everything. "We land in 1 hour. Are you ready?" "I am ready." He studied her face. "This will be difficult. The medical system is different from ours. They are methodical, careful. They do not improvise." "I know, I grew up with them." "Then you know they may not accept our methods easily. They may resist. They may think we are too chaotic, too reckless." Nodded. She knew all of this. She had lived it her entire life. Growing up among the had not been easy. She was different from everyone around her. Smaller, faster, shorter-lived. She felt emotions more intensely. She moved more quickly. She made decisions in seconds that would debate for hours. Some had looked at her with curiosity, some with suspicion, some with open dislike. But her mother, Ambassador, had never wavered. She had taught both discipline and human compassion. She had told her the story of Dr. Park so many times that could recite it in her sleep. She had raised her to be a bridge between two worlds. Now it was time to prove that the bridge could hold. The landing was rough. The spaceport was overwhelmed with ships bringing supplies and personnel, and her team grabbed their equipment and headed for the main hospital. What she found there broke her heart. The hospital was full beyond capacity. Patients lay in hallways, in waiting rooms, in any space that could hold a bed. The doctors moved among them with exhausted efficiency, but they were losing. The numbers were too great. The disease moved too fast. The chief medical officer was unnamed. She was old, nearly 500 years, and she looked like she had not slept in weeks. "You are the humans." It was not a question. "I have read about your methods. I do not think they will work here." "With respect, Chief, they will work," stepped forward. "I understand your protocols. I was raised, but right now your protocols are not enough. You need to adapt." His eyes narrowed. "You are the one they call the bridge, the human child raised by Ambassador." "I am. I watched the recording of your rescue when I was young. Your birth mother," paused, something shifting in her face. "She was remarkable." "She was, and she taught me something important even though she never knew me. She taught me that when someone needs help, you help them. You figure out the rest later." Stared at her for a long moment, then slowly she nodded. "Tell me what you need." Got to work. The first thing she taught them was triage. They wanted to treat everyone equally in order by protocol, but there was no time for that. Showed them how to sort patients into groups, those who would survive without immediate help, those who needed help now, those who could not be saved. It was brutal, it was efficient, and it was necessary. The doctors resisted at first. The idea of choosing who to save went against everything they believed. But as the hours passed, as they saw the results, they began to understand. "We cannot save everyone," told them, "but we can save more. That is what matters." The second thing she taught them was shifts. The doctors had been working around the clock, wearing themselves down to nothing, forced them to rest. She set up rotations. She made sure no one worked more than 12 hours at a time. "A tired doctor makes mistakes," she said. "A rested doctor saves lives." The third thing she taught them was improvisation. When they ran out of a certain medicine, she showed them alternatives. When equipment broke, she showed them workarounds. When the protocol did not fit the situation, she showed them how to adapt. "The rules are tools," she said. "Use them when they help, change them when they do not." The human and doctors began to work together, slowly at first with suspicion and awkwardness. But as the days passed, something remarkable happened. They became a team. The precision combined with the human adaptability created something neither species could achieve alone. The caught details the humans missed. The humans moved faster when speed was needed. Together, they were better than either could be separately. The death toll slowed, then it stopped rising, then it began to fall. It took 6 weeks to contain the plague. 6 weeks of exhaustion and fear and loss. Hundreds still died, but thousands lived who would not have survived without the human volunteers. When it was over, stood in the hospital courtyard as the sun rose over 4. She had not slept in 30 hours. Her body ached in ways she did not know were possible, but she was smiling. Chief came to stand beside her. "You saved us," the old said quietly. "Your people saved us." "We saved each other," looked at her. "That is how it should always be." Was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been hanging in the air for 20 years. "Do you ever think about her, the doctor who saved you?" Did not need to ask who she meant. "Every day I never knew her, but she is with me always. In every patient I treat, in every life I save, I am her legacy. She would be proud of you." "I hope so." His voice was thick with emotion. "I try to make her proud." 1 month later, stood before the Galactic Council in the same chamber where her fate had been decided 2 decades before. The seats were filled with representatives from dozens of species. At the front, looking old but still strong, sat her mother, Ambassador. "The plague on 4 has been contained," announced. The death toll was tragic, but it could have been far worse. Human and medical teams worked together to save tens of thousands of lives. She paused, looking around the chamber. 20 years ago, you voted to welcome humanity into the Galactic Union. Some of you had doubts. Some of you were afraid. I understand. I am proof that humans can work together. I am proof that our differences make us stronger, not weaker. She thought of Dr. Park, a young woman who had given everything for a child she would never know. I am alive because a stranger loved me enough to die for me. That is the human way. We do not just survive our tragedies. We transform them into something greater. We take our pain and turn it into purpose. She looked at her mother. Eyes were filled with tears, but she was smiling. Dr. Park saved one life. Mine. Because of her sacrifice, I have helped save thousands. And those thousands will save thousands more. That is her true legacy. Not death, but life. Not ending, but beginning. The council voted to make the human medical partnership permanent. It was unanimous. Afterward, traveled to the forest moon where she had been found. A memorial had been built there on the hill above the crash site. A statue of Dr. Park stood in the center, her hands outstretched as if reaching to save a falling child. Stood before the statue as the sun set through the trees. She held a bouquet of flowers from Earth, the kind her mother said might have liked. She placed them at the base of the statue. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me a chance. Thank you for showing the galaxy what we can be." The wind stirred the trees around her. For a moment, it almost sounded like a voice. "I will keep saving them," promised. "For both of us, for all of us, until my last breath." She stood there until the stars came out. Then she turned and walked back to her ship. There was work to do. There were lives to save. There were bridges to build. And somewhere among the stars, the spirit of Dr. Park smiled. Her sacrifice had changed everything. Her legacy would never end.